Brit. She was abandoned pregnant in the snow. The vampire duke said, "Those babies are mine now." The snow fell heavily that night, blanketing the forest in silence. The wind howled through the tall, dark pines, and each gust seemed to carry whispers of forgotten stories. Elara stumbled through the snow, her thin cloak barely protecting her from the biting cold. Her feet were numb, and her body shivered uncontrollably. Her hands clutched her belly instinctively, feeling the tiny life within her, the life that had become a reason both for fear and hope. She had been running for days. After discovering her pregnancy, her lover had abandoned her without a word. The village she had called home had turned its back as well, whispering cruel words behind closed doors. The people she had trusted now looked at her as though she were a burden, a shadow of shame to be avoided. Each step through the snow felt heavier than the last, but she could not stop. She could not give up. Her body ached, and her lungs burned, but she kept moving. She had nowhere to go, no one to help her. And then, just when her strength was failing, she stumbled into a clearing. The moon shone pale and cold above her, casting long shadows on the snow. She sank to her knees, exhaustion overtaking her. Her vision blurred, and her head drooped forward. She felt as if the world itself had abandoned her. "Please, someone," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. But there was no answer, only the rustle of trees and the distant howl of a wolf. Elara pressed her hand to the snow, feeling the ice biting her skin, yet she could not move. Her mind swam with fear and despair. Then a shadow fell over her. Psht! She looked up, blinking through her tears, and saw a figure emerging from the forest. Tall, dark, and impossibly elegant, he moved with a silence that made her heart race. His eyes were piercing, almost unnatural, glowing faintly in the moonlight. His presence was commanding, as if the forest itself bowed to him. "You should not be here," the man said, his voice deep and calm. It carried authority and danger in equal measure. Elara tried to speak, but her lips trembled and no words came. He knelt beside her without hesitation. "You are very cold," he said, his fingers brushing against her shoulder. She flinched at the touch, but there was no malice in it, only curiosity and a strange, protective force. My babies," Elara whispered, her voice breaking. I cannot survive out here."
Please.
He studied her carefully, his expression unreadable. "Babies?" he asked.
His voice softened slightly, almost a whisper.
"You are carrying children." "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face.
I am alone. My family. My village. They all turned away. I don't know where to go. Please. Her voice cracked with fear and exhaustion. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with something she could not name. Then, without warning, he lifted her effortlessly into his arms. She gasped at his strength, her body trembling not only from cold but from the strange mixture of fear and awe she felt toward him. "You are not safe here," he said. "Come with me." The forest seemed to part before him, as if he commanded the very shadows. He moved swiftly, and though Elara's body was heavy with exhaustion and fear, she clung to him, unable to resist. She wanted to question him, to demand answers, but the snow around them, the cold biting at her, left her too weak to speak. After what felt like hours, though it could have been only minutes, they reached a castle. It rose from the snow like a black monument, tall towers piercing the sky, walls that seemed carved from shadow itself. Brit. Light flickered from the windows, warm and golden, a stark contrast to the cold night outside. The gates opened silently at his approach, and he carried her inside, into warmth and shelter. Brit. The hall was vast and silent, filled with portraits of people long gone. The walls were lined with torches that cast dancing shadows, giving the room an almost alive quality. Brit.
Elara could not tear her eyes away from the flickering flames. Where?
Brit. Where am I? She asked, her voice barely audible. You are in my castle, he said simply. Brit. I am Duke Lucian. Elara, she said, offering her name. I am Elara. Brit. Please, I cannot stay here. I don't belong here. Brit. She shook her head, overwhelmed by fear and confusion. I just want to survive. Lucian studied her, his dark eyes never leaving her face. Brit. Then in a voice both firm and commanding, he said, Those babies are mine now. Elara froze, her heart pounding. What do you mean? They are under my protection, he said. Brit. No harm will come to them while I breathe. And while I protect them, I will protect you as well. Elara's mind raced. Brit. She did not understand him. She did not trust him. Brit. And yet, there was something in his presence, in the certainty of his words that made her believe just slightly that perhaps she could survive. You, Brit, you cannot just take them, she whispered. They are my children. They belong to me, Brit. They belong to both of us, he said quietly, almost as if revealing a secret. And I will not allow anyone to harm them, not even you if you do not protect them yourself. She shivered, not from cold this time, but from the weight of his words. Brit. His eyes were unyielding, but there was a strange warmth beneath the surface. She did not know whether to fear him or to trust him, but in that moment, exhaustion and desperation left her with no choice. Brit. Lucian led her to a chamber, a room filled with warmth and soft light. A fire burned in the hearth, casting golden reflections across the walls. Brit. The bed was large, covered with thick blankets, and he helped her onto it gently. You will rest, he said. Brit. Eat. Drink. Brit. Gather your strength. Brit. Tomorrow we will speak more. Elara nodded weakly, too tired to protest. But as she lay down, she felt the weight of the night pressing on her. But for the first time, there was a small, fragile hope. Perhaps she would survive. Perhaps her children would survive. Lucian lingered at the doorway, watching her sleep. Brit. His expression was unreadable, but there was a tension in his posture, a flicker of emotion he could not hide. He had lived for centuries, seen kingdoms rise and fall, and yet something about this fragile human carrying new life stirred something long buried within him. Brit. Outside, the wind continued to howl, and snow fell thicker than ever. But inside the castle, there was warmth. Brit. Inside the castle, a new story had begun. A story of survival, protection, and an unexpected bond between a human mother and a vampire duke. As dawn approached, Elara awoke slowly, feeling the fire's warmth against her chilled skin. Brit. She looked around the room, remembering the night before. The castle, the mysterious man, the promise of protection. Everything felt like a dream. But the faint sound of footsteps in the hall reminded her it was real. Lucian appeared at the doorway again, his eyes dark and serious. Brit. You have survived the night, he said simply. Good, Brit. You will need strength for what comes next. There are forces in the world that will seek to take your children, Brit. They will not stop, and you must be ready to fight for them, even if it means trusting me. Brit. Aelara's heart pounded. Fight? Brit. Trust? These were not words she had wanted to hear, but the look in his eyes told her this was no idle warning. Brit. The snow outside hid dangers she could not see, and the world beyond the castle walls was not kind. Brit. I will do what I must, she whispered. Her voice trembled, but there was a spark of determination now, a fire that would not be extinguished. Brit. Lucian nodded once, and with a sweep of his cloak, he left the room. Brit. Aelara lay back against the blankets, her thoughts racing. She did not know what the future held. Brit. She did not know if she could survive the coming days. But she knew one thing. She would protect her children. Brit. And somehow, with this strange and dangerous Duke watching over them, she might just live to see the dawn.
Hours passed, and the snow continued to fall outside.
Brit. Aelara rested, gathering her strength, while Lucian moved through the castle with silent purpose, unseen and unheard. His mind was already planning, already preparing for the threats that would come. Desperate, he had claimed these children as his own, and he would stop at nothing to keep them safe. And in the quiet of the castle, a new bond began to form. A bond of survival, of trust slowly being earned, and of a connection neither Aelara nor Lucian fully understood yet. The world outside was harsh and unkind, but within the walls of the dark tower and castle, the first threads of hope began to take root. But even in this moment of fragile safety, both knew that danger was never far away. Brit. Shadows stirred beyond the gates, eyes watched from the forest, and forces older than memory waited for a chance to strike. And as Aelara drifted into a troubled sleep, the wind outside whispered a warning. The journey had only just begun. Brit. The morning sun struggled to break through the heavy clouds that hung over the forest. The snow outside glimmered faintly, like a sea of shattered glass, but the castle remained shadowed and silent. Brit. Inside, the halls echoed with the quiet steps of Duke Lucian as he moved through corridors lined with ancient portraits. The eyes of the painted ancestors seemed to follow him, and though he had walked these halls for centuries, he never ignored their gaze.
But Aelara had spent the night in her chamber, wrapped in the warmth of thick blankets. Sleep had come reluctantly, each rustle of the castle's shadows making her startle.
But for the first time in days, she felt a small spark of safety. She was alive, and her children were alive, and that thought gave her courage, even if only a little. By mid-morning, Lucian returned to her chamber.
His presence was as commanding as it had been the night before, but now there was a hint of gentleness in his dark gaze.
"Rise," he said simply. "There is much to do."
Alara rose slowly, her body still aching from her journey through the snow. Madame C.D. of Lana bears other word to me.
Brit. She avoided looking at him directly, unsure of what she felt. Fear mingled with curiosity, and a small, reluctant respect had begun to grow. Brit. Lucian studied her silently for a moment, then said, "You must eat. You need strength. Not just for yourself, but for your children." Brit. Hunger weakens the mind as much as the body. Aelara took the plate he offered, and they ate in silence. Brit stiff. Each bite felt heavy, carrying with it the weight of unspoken questions.
She wanted to ask him why he had taken her in, why he had claimed her children as his own, but the words caught in her throat.
Brit. Finally, she spoke. "Why me? Why not let me die out there?" Lucian's eyes darkened, and he looked away, his gaze falling on a distant window where the snow fell like silver sparks. "Because I do not allow children to die if I can prevent it," he said. Brit. His voice was low, almost like a growl beneath the calm. "And because you are carrying life, Life that deserves protection, no matter the cost. Elara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. She wanted to trust him, but centuries of warnings whispered in her mind, trust no one. And yet his words carried weight, and there was a strange sincerity she could not deny. After a few moments, Lucian said, you must learn about this place, about the world you are now a part of, whether you wish it or not. You are not alone, Elara, but danger will come, and soon. He led her through the castle halls, revealing chambers filled with knowledge, artifacts and weapons that glimmered with faint magic. He explained the history of the vampire clans, the ancient wars, and the delicate balance of power that kept humans and supernatural beings apart. Elara listened, trying to absorb everything, though much of it seemed unreal, like a story told by a madman. Yet, Lucian's eyes held an undeniable truth. His words were not fantasy. His warning was real. And somewhere deep inside, Elara knew that surviving here would require more than courage. It would require trust, skill, and perhaps a part of herself she had never known before. As the hours passed, Lucian's demeanor softened slightly. He spoke of his past, though carefully, revealing just fragments of the centuries he had lived. He told her of a world filled with both beauty and cruelty, of alliances and betrayals, of love and loss. And though he spoke with restraint, she could sense the weight of grief that clung to him like a shadow. You have known loss, he said quietly at one point, studying her face. Do not pretend you have not. That pain is what shapes us, makes us strong, or sometimes breaks us. Elara wanted to speak, to tell him of her own pain, of the nights spent crying alone in her room, of the betrayal she had endured. But she could not find the words. Instead, she nodded silently, understanding that he too carried a burden. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden sound from outside. A harsh, unnatural howl echoed through the castle walls, sending a shiver down Elara's spine. Lucian's expression hardened instantly. They are here, he said, his voice tight with tension. Enemies! They seek the children. We cannot let them take what is mine to protect. Before Elara could respond, the castle trembled. Shadows moved unnaturally along the walls, and the air grew heavy with magic. Lucian's eyes glowed faintly as he moved toward the windows, scanning the snow-covered grounds. They will not stop, he said, his voice low and dangerous. And neither will I. Elara felt fear twist inside her. She had imagined dangers in the night, but this was real. And yet, she could not ignore the fierce determination in his eyes, the silent promise that no harm would come to her or her children while he stood guard. Suddenly, the doors to the great hall burst open, and figures cloaked in darkness slipped inside. Their movements were swift and precise, shadows flitting across the walls. Elara froze, unsure of what to do, her heart pounding in her chest. Lucian moved with impossible speed, intercepting the intruders before they could reach her. The sound of struggle filled the hall, echoes of magic and movement. He fought with a strength and precision that seemed beyond human, each motion deliberate, powerful, and flawless. Elara watched, horrified and amazed, as he protected her with every fiber of his being. One of the intruders lunged toward her, but Lucian intercepted with a force that sent the figure sprawling across the floor. Another tried to approach from behind, but a flick of his hand and a shadow seemed to wrap around the intruder, holding them immobile. Elara realized with a mixture of fear and awe that this man, this vampire, was more than what he seemed. He was not only strong, but capable of protecting them in ways she could never imagine. Brett. And yet, the danger around them was real. She had seen it. Pressed. She had felt it. The intruders were relentless, and the fight continued, moving through the corridors and into the castle's inner chambers. Brett. Elora clutched the thick blanket around her, her body shaking. She wanted to help, wanted to do something, but fear rooted her to the spot. Brett. All she could do was watch, helpless, as Lucian defended their lives with fierce determination. Finally, after what felt like hours, the intruders retreated, melting into the shadows from which they had come. Lucian stood alone in the hall, breathing heavily, his cloak torn in places, his eyes dark with a storm of emotion. Brett. He looked at Alara, and for the first time his expression softened completely. "Are you unharmed?" he asked, his voice low, almost gentle. Alara nodded shakily. Brett. "Thanks to you." He moved closer, his presence overwhelming, yet strangely comforting. Brett. "Do not thank me," he said. "I swore to protect your children, and I will not fail." Brett. "No one will harm them while I am here." Tears welled in Alara's eyes. She wanted to speak, to tell him that she was grateful, that she was scared, that she did not know how she could survive without him, but words failed her. Instead, she simply nodded, understanding that their lives were now intertwined in ways she could not yet comprehend. The day passed slowly after that. Elara remained in her chamber, trying to gather her thoughts and calm her racing heart. Brett. Lucian moved silently through the castle, attending to its defenses, preparing for any further attacks. She realized that life within these walls was a delicate balance of vigilance and trust, a constant struggle against the unseen threats of the world outside. Brett. As night fell once more, Elara found herself staring out the window, watching the snow fall. The forest beyond the castle seemed quiet now, but she knew it was only a temporary calm. Brett. Shadows moved in secret, waiting for the chance to strike, and though she feared the coming days, she also felt a strange sense of connection to the man who had saved her, to the life growing within her, to the strange and dangerous world she was now a part of. Brett. Suddenly, a sound broke the quiet, a faint rustling, almost imperceptible, coming from the direction of the castle gates. Alara's heart skipped a beat. She had learned enough to know that danger never rested, and now it was close once more. Lucian appeared at her side before she could move, his presence as solid and reassuring as the walls of the castle. Desperate, he placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch steadying. "Do not fear," he said. Brett. "I will protect you. Whatever comes, we face it together." Brett. Elara looked up at him, and for the first time she saw not only a fearsome vampire, but a being capable of deep loyalty and care. Her heart, though still wary, felt a flicker of something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. Brett. But outside the windows, the shadows shifted. Figures moved through the snow, watching the castle, waiting. Brett. And though Elara felt a fragile sense of safety, she knew in her heart that the world beyond these walls was cruel, relentless, and hungry for the life she carried. And so, as the firelight danced across the walls, and Lucian's dark figure stood guard, she understood that her journey had only just begun. Brett, for her children, for her own survival, and for the strange bond forming between her and the vampire duke would test every ounce of her courage and strength. The night stretched on, heavy with the promise of challenges to come. Brett. Elara closed her eyes, resting for the moment, knowing that when dawn arrived, the world outside would be waiting, and so would the shadows that threatened everything she held dear. The castle was silent as the first shadows of night fell. The firelight flickered across the cold stone walls, casting long, dancing shapes. Elara sat in her chamber, clutching a blanket around her shoulders, trying to calm her racing heart. The events of the past day haunted her. Attacks, shadows, the fierce protection of Lucian, and she felt both terrified and strangely drawn to him. She could not deny it. Phew. The way he moved through the castle, silent and commanding, had stirred something deep within her. There was strength, yes, but also a loneliness in him she recognized, a quiet sorrow that mirrored her own. She thought of her children growing inside her, of the promise he had made to protect them, and of the strange bond that had begun between them. Suddenly, a soft knock at her door startled her. "Elena!" Lucian's voice was low and careful.
Brit. She quickly covered herself with the blanket.
Yes, she whispered.
Brit, come in. The door opened slowly and Lucian stepped inside. His presence filled the room, yet there was a gentleness to his movements that made her heart flutter. Brit.
He studied her silently for a moment before speaking. "You must be ready to move," he said quietly.
I sense danger approaching, shadows that will not wait for us to be prepared. Elara's eyes widened. Move? Where would we go? There are hidden chambers beneath the castle, he explained. Brit, passages that even few know exist. They are old, protected by ancient magic, and they can keep you safe. But you must trust me to lead you there. Elara's heart pounded, but the thought of descending into the unknown terrified her. Yet the look in Lucian's eyes, dark and steady, filled her with a strange sense of security. She nodded slowly. "I will trust you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Brit, for my children's sake." Lucian inclined his head, his expression unreadable, but something softened around his eyes. "Good," he said. "Brit, we leave now." The castle corridor seemed endless as they moved, shadows flickering across the walls. Lucian's steps were silent, almost floating, and Elara found herself struggling to keep up. Brit. Yet there was no fear in his movements, only certainty and purpose. "Tell me," she asked cautiously, "why do they want my children?" Lucian's face darkened. "Brit, there are factions in the supernatural world that believe certain bloodlines hold power. Your children carry life that is precious, Brit. Rare, Brit. Those who seek to control them will stop at nothing. That is why I claim them as mine. Brit. No one will harm them while I breathe." Elara swallowed hard, feeling a chill in her chest. "Even if I am alone, they will not take my children?" "They will not," Lucian said firmly. "Not while I stand here." They reached a large tapestry covering a wall. Brit. Lucian ran his hand along its edge, muttering an incantation under his breath. Slowly, the tapestry shifted, revealing a hidden doorway. Brit. "Elara!" gasped. This is... Brit. "Amazing," she whispered. "Do not be distracted," Lucian said softly, but there was a faint smile in his eyes. "Brit, we must be swift." They descended into the hidden chambers beneath the castle. The air was cooler here, tinged with magic and something older, something ancient. Brit. The walls were lined with runes that glowed faintly, illuminating the passage ahead. Elara's fear slowly gave way to awe. Brit. The castle was far more than a home. It was a fortress, a place built to protect, filled with knowledge, power, and secrets long forgotten. They had not traveled far when a sudden sound echoed through the passages, a whisper, almost inaudible, yet unmistakably close. Brit.
Elora froze, her breath catching in her throat. "What was that?" she asked.
Brit. Lucian's eyes narrowed. "An enemy is here," he said. Brit.
And they are clever. They know we are moving.
Brit.
Elara's pulse raced. What do we do?
We hide, Lucian said, motioning her into a small alcove carved into the wall.
Brit.
Stay silent. Breathe slowly.
Brit. Trust me. Moments later, a shadow passed through the corridor ahead. Brit. Lucian stepped forward, his body tense, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. He moved silently, a predator in his own domain, and the figure disappeared into the deeper passages. Brit. Elara's heart pounded, but she realized something. She was not as helpless as she had been before. Brit. She had learned to pay attention, to move cautiously, to anticipate danger. Brit. And though fear still gripped her, she felt a spark of strength, a courage born not just from desperation, but from love and determination to protect her children. When the intruder had passed, Lucian returned to her side. Brit, you are stronger than you think, he said quietly. Do not forget that. Brit. Strength is not only in the body, but in the mind and heart.
Elara looked up at him, and for a moment the fear and tension fell away. She saw not only a powerful vampire, but a being capable of loyalty, protection, and perhaps even understanding.
Brit, I will try, she whispered. Brit. Lucian nodded, but his expression grew serious again. We are not safe yet, he said.
Brit. And there are more dangers ahead, forces that will test your courage, your mind, and your heart.
Brit. They continued through the passages deeper and deeper beneath the castle. The air grew heavier, the magic older, and the shadows thicker.
Brit. Elara felt a strange connection to this place, a sense that it was alive in some way, watching, guiding, and protecting them. Finally, they reached a small chamber at the heart of the hidden passages. Brit. The room was simple yet comforting, with soft light from enchanted crystals and walls lined with ancient symbols of protection. Elara sank into a chair, exhaustion overtaking her. Brit. Lucian knelt beside her, his hand brushing against hers. Rest, he said. Brit. You will need all your strength. Tomorrow, we will begin preparing for the challenges to come. Brit.
You must be ready. Elara looked at him, noticing something she had not before. A vulnerability, a softness beneath the harsh exterior. Do you...
Brit, ever get tired of fighting? She asked softly. Lucian's gaze darkened, and he looked away for a moment. Brit. I have lived centuries, he said quietly. I have seen kingdoms rise and fall, friends lost and enemies gained. I have fought and survived, but there is always a price. I fight because I must, and because there are things worth protecting. Brit. Tonight, you and your children are those things. Elara felt a warmth spread through her chest. But she had never known a world like this, a world of magic, danger, and power, yet she felt a strange belonging here. She was scared, yes, but she also felt alive in a way she had never known. Brit. As the night deepened, Lucian stood and moved to the center of the room. He murmured an incantation, and the air shimmered with protective magic. Brit. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, casting long, moving shadows. Elara watched, fascinated and awed. Brit. You see this? Lucian said, his voice low. These wards will protect us. For now. Brit. But no spell is perfect. We must remain vigilant. Brit.
Elara nodded. I understand.
For a while they sat in silence, the room glowing softly with magic. Brit. Elara felt a strange sense of peace, yet she knew it was fragile. Danger was never far, and the world outside these walls was relentless. Then, without warning, the air in the chamber shifted. A cold wind swept through the room, snuffing out the crystal's light for a moment. Elara's heart skipped a beat. Lucian's eyes flared. "They are here," he said, "and they will not wait." The hidden chamber trembled slightly, and Elara realized the danger was closer than ever. Shadows moved at the edges of the room, faint whispers echoing like the voices of the past. She gripped the edge of her chair, fear and determination battling within her. Lucian moved to stand in front of her, his presence a shield she could almost feel. "Do not fear," he said firmly. "We face this together. Whatever comes, we will survive." "You are not alone." Elara looked at him, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the bond forming between them. She trusted him, though only partially. She felt a spark of something deeper, something that went beyond fear, beyond survival. She felt the stirrings of hope, of courage, and of love that could grow even in the darkest of places. Outside the hidden chambers, the shadows grew thicker. Forces older than memory had come for the children, and for the first time, Elara understood that this was only the beginning. She was no longer just a frightened woman in the snow. She was a mother, a protector, and a part of something far greater than she had ever imagined. Lucian turned toward her, his eyes softening slightly. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow we face the world together." "And no matter what happens, I will not let harm come to you or your children."
Elara closed her eyes, her heart pounding. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, dangerous, and filled with challenges she could not yet imagine.
But with Lucian by her side, she felt a courage she had never known. And as the first faint light of dawn touched the hidden chamber, she understood one thing clearly. The fight for her children, for her own survival, and for the bond forming between her and the vampire duke was far from over. The world outside was dark, cruel, and hungry, but within the castle, and within her own heart, something powerful had begun to awaken. The wind howled across the castle grounds as night fell. Snow swirled around the towers like silver sparks, carrying with it a cold that seemed to seep into the very stones. Below in the hidden chamber, Elara clutched her stomach, feeling the tiny movements of her children. They were alive, safe for now, but the shadow of danger pressed against the walls like a living thing.
Lucian stood by the entrance, his dark eyes scanning the corridors beyond the chamber.
His presence was both terrifying and comforting, a shadow that promised protection. For centuries he had faced death, betrayal, and enemies beyond counting, but the thought of harm coming to these unborn children stirred something he had long buried. Fear, and yet an unwavering resolve. "Elara," he said quietly, his voice firm but calm. "They are coming. Soon there will be no more waiting. You must be ready." Elara nodded, her pulse racing. She had spent days learning to trust him, learning to trust herself. Her fear remained, but now it was tempered by courage. She had realized that her children's lives, and her own, depended on strength, clarity, and the strange growing bond between herself and the vampire duke who had saved her. What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly.
Lucian moved closer, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder.
We face them. Together.
"I will not allow harm to come to you or the children. You will not face this alone."
Alara took a deep breath. Then, let's face it, beyond the chamber the shadows shifted.
Brit. Figures emerged, cloaked and silent, moving like smoke. They were not ordinary intruders. Their presence carried a weight of ancient magic, a hunger that had endured for centuries. Brit. Lucian's eyes flared, a faint glow of power rising from within him. The air itself seemed to respond to his presence, trembling with anticipation. Brit.
They are powerful, Lucian said, but together we are stronger.
Brit. Stay close to me and trust in the bond we share. You will see that love and courage can overcome even the oldest darkness. Brit. The intruders approached, their footsteps silent on the cold stone floors. Alara's heart pounded, but she no longer felt paralyzed by fear. Desperate, she stood tall, holding her belly instinctively, and looked at Lucian. He met her gaze, and in that moment she saw the truth she had begun to understand. Strength was not only in him, but in them. Together, Brit. Suddenly, the leader of the shadows stepped forward. A tall figure wrapped in a cloak darker than night itself. Its eyes glowed faintly, and Alara felt a chill that went beyond the cold of the snow. Purred. The figure raised a hand, and a wave of magic surged toward them, a test of power and will.
Lucian met it without hesitation.
Brit. His body moved fluidly, channeling his centuries of knowledge and strength. The air crackled as magic clashed, light against dark, protection against threat. Alara felt the warmth of his power surround her, a shield she could not see but could feel with every fiber of her being.
You will not harm them, Lucian said, his voice carrying authority that seemed to shake the shadows themselves.
Brit. The intruder hesitated, and in that moment Alara stepped forward. Her hands glowed faintly, a shimmer of energy that startled her. Brit. She did not understand it fully, but it was a reflection of her determination, her courage, and her love for the life within her. Lucian looked at her, eyes wide with a mix of surprise and pride. Brit. You are stronger than you know, he whispered. Brit. Together, they faced the shadows. Alara's fear transformed into focus, each step deliberate, each breath measured. The magic in her hands pulsed with life, and with Lucian at her side, they began to drive the intruders back. The leader of the shadows roared, a sound like ice cracking in the night. Brit. You cannot win, it cried, its voice echoing through the chamber. Lucian's eyes glowed brighter. Brit. We do not fight for victory alone. We fight for life, for love, and for those who cannot protect themselves. Brit. And that is a power you cannot match. Alara felt the truth of his words fill her. The children inside her stirred, as if responding to the courage that surged within her. Brit. She raised her hands, letting the energy flow freely, a shield of life and light that radiated from her very heart. The shadows faltered.
Brit. The leader screamed in frustration, but it could not overcome the bond, the courage, and the life that surged through Alara and Lucian. Slowly, the intruders retreated, melting back into the darkness from which they had come.
Brit. For a moment, silence reigned. The chamber glowed faintly with residual magic, and Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but alive. Brit. Lucian knelt beside her, brushing the hair from her face with gentle care. You did it, he said quietly, awe in his voice. Brit.
You protected them. You protected yourself.
Brit. And you proved something far greater than any magic, the strength of the heart. Tears streamed down Alara's cheeks. Brit. She had feared this night, feared that they would fail, feared the darkness outside the castle walls. But now she felt something she had not known in a long time. Hope, desperate and a strange, fierce love for the man who had fought beside her, who had not only protected her children but helped her discover the courage within herself.
Lucian's hand rested over hers, and for a moment the centuries of sorrow and loneliness he had carried seemed to melt away.
Brit, you are remarkable, he said softly. Do not doubt your power, your heart, or your courage.
Elara looked into his eyes, and in that gaze she saw a reflection of her own growing feelings.
Brit, fear had once ruled her life, but now there was trust, admiration, and the beginnings of something more. A bond forged in danger, strengthened by shared struggle and tempered by love. The night outside remained cold, but the hidden chamber felt warm. Brit, disparity. Safe, alive. Brit. And for the first time since the snow had claimed her, Elara felt that survival was not enough. She felt that she could live, and even thrive in this strange, magical world alongside the vampire duke who had changed her life forever. Brit. Lucian helped her to her feet. We must prepare for the days ahead, he said. Brit. The world beyond these walls is not yet quiet, and more threats will come, but together we are unstoppable. You, me, and the life you carry. Brit. Elara nodded, a small smile touching her lips. Then we face it together, she said. August. The next morning the snow had begun to melt slightly, sunlight filtering weakly through the heavy clouds. The castle, once cold and foreboding, now seemed alive with quiet strength. Elara moved through the halls with more confidence, her steps steady. Lucian walked beside her, protective but respectful, never overbearing. Brit. They spoke little, but the silence was comfortable. Words were not always necessary when trust and courage bound two people together. Brit. And though danger still lingered outside, both felt a deep assurance. Whatever came, they would face it side by side. Days passed, and Elara grew stronger. Brit. She learned to move through the castle with quiet purpose, to sense the shifts of magic in the air, to anticipate threats before they arrived. Lucian trained her gently, teaching her to focus her energy, to trust her instincts, and to protect the life within her, at desperate. And with each lesson the bond between them deepened. Fear turned to respect. Brit. Respect turned to admiration. And admiration slowly, subtly, blossomed into something neither could deny. A connection that transcended fear, centuries, and difference. One evening, as the first faint stars appeared in the sky, Elara and Lucian stood on the highest tower of the castle. The wind was cold, but the world stretched before them in quiet beauty. Brit. She rested her hand on the stone railing, looking at the distant forest, now calm after the storms of the past days.
You've changed me, Lucian said quietly.
Brit. His eyes, dark and fathomless, met hers. You've shown me something I thought I had lost long ago. Hope. Brit. Trust. Life. Brit. And love. Brit.
I was afraid, she said softly. Afraid of the world, afraid of losing everything.
Brit.
But you showed me that strength comes from the heart, not just the body.
Brit.
Lucian took her hand in his, holding it gently but firmly. And I will always protect you, he said.
Brit.
Always. As long as I live, no shadow, no enemy will ever harm you or your children.
Tears came to her eyes, but they were tears of relief and joy. Brit. She realized that survival was only the beginning. Life, love, and family were now possible, even in a world of darkness and danger. A gentle warmth spread through her as she rested her hand on her belly. She felt the children moving, responding to her heart, to her hope, and to the bond she shared with Lucian. Brit. They were alive. They were safe.
Brit.
and together they had overcome darkness. The wind blew softly across the castle, carrying the promise of new beginnings.
Brit. Outside, the world was still harsh and unkind, but within the walls of the fortress, life, love, and hope had taken root. Lucian wrapped a protective arm around her, and for the first time neither fear nor doubt shadowed their hearts. Brit. Together they faced the future, stronger, braver, and bound by a love forged in shadows and light. The snow continued to fall lightly, but now it felt gentle, almost like a blessing. Brit. Elara breathed deeply, feeling the life within her, feeling the protection and loyalty of Lucian, and knowing, for the first time, that they had survived not only the night, but had found each other in the darkness. Brit. And so, in the quiet of the castle, beneath the watchful stars and the first soft light of dawn, a new chapter began. Breath. One of love, of courage, of redemption, and of life. Stronger than fear, brighter than the longest night, and bound forever to the heart of a vampire who had claimed them all as his own.